Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia. Welcome back to the Overwatch Esports Roundup. So, we have the results from Open Division Season 1 2020 for Europe this time. We've already looked at China, the Pacific and Australia, but now we have some results for Europe to take a look at. And hopefully, I can actually say all of the names from the European teams. So, that's great. Woo! NA and South America will be coming up very soon. But without further ado, let's take a look at Europe then. So the participants were Ex Oblivione, Olympians, Dreadlords, False Alarm, Vox Nihili, which I believe I have actually mentioned before in Breakable Barriers. I'm not totally sure about that though. Citizens Seraph, Not in Contenders, Sauna Esports, Alter Ego, Ex Nihilio, Unknown Esports Team Cosmos, Project Phoenix, Sheer Cold, Barcelona Manticores, which I believe we've also seen in Breakable Barriers as well, Any Flexes, and No Commitments. So, those are your participants for Open Division Season 1 2020 in Europe, but now let's take a look at the bracket. We start off, as always, with Round 1. Anyone who loses in Round 1 goes down to the losers bracket. If you win in Round 1, you move on to the quarterfinals of the winners bracket. So, starting off with Ex Oblivione taking on No Commitments. This actually is probably one of the first times I've ever seen a map taken by both teams in the first game that we've seen, but this is a 3-1 for Ex Oblivione, with them moving on to the quarterfinals. No Commitments will be dropping down to the losers bracket. Then we had Sauna Esports taking on Alter Ego. This is a return to form for the early stages of Open Division, where we see a 3-0 victory for Sauna Esports. Then we had False Alarm taking on Sheer Cold. This again, 3-0 win for Sheer Cold, with Sheer Cold moving on to the quarterfinals. Then we had Vox Nihili taking on Project Phoenix. This was a 3-0 for Vox Nihili. I believe they will be one of the better teams in this competition. So moving on after that, we had Olympians taking on Any Flexes. This was a 3-0 victory for Olympians, with them moving on to the quarterfinals of the winners bracket. Then we had Not in Contenders taking on Ex Nihilio. This was a 3-0 victory for Not in Contenders. I am going to be saying Not in Contenders for quite a bit during this video, so get used to it. Moving on, we had Dreadlords taking on the Barcelona Manticores. This was a 3-0 win for the Dreadlords. And then we have Citizens Seraph taking on Unknown Esports, and this was a 3-0 victory for the Citizens, with them moving on to the quarterfinal. Moving to the losers bracket round 1 then, we had Alter Ego taking on No Commitments. This was the first very close game, with No Commitments getting a 3-2 victory over Alter Ego and dumping them out of Open Division, and ultimately ending their chances of a Contenders Trials appearance this season. Then we had Project Phoenix taking on False Alarm. This was a 3-1 victory for Project Phoenix, with them moving on. And then we had Ex Nihilio taking on Any Flexes. This was the end of Any Flexes' Open Division tournament, with Ex Nihilio moving on 3-1. And then we had Unknown Esports taking on the Barcelona Manticores. This was a 3-0 victory for the Barcelona Manticores. They will move on to the losers bracket round 2. So, winners bracket quarterfinals then. Ex Oblivione would take on Sauna Esports. This was a very close game, with Ex Oblivione taking a 3-2 victory over Sauna Esports and moving on to the semi-finals of the winners bracket. Then we saw Sheer Cold take on Vox Nihili. This was a 3-0 victory for Sheer Cold. Sheer Cold have looked very good during this Open Division tournament. Vox Nihili will drop down to the losers bracket. Then we see Olympians taking on Not in Contenders. This was a very close game, with Not in Contenders taking a 3-2 victory over Olympians. Then we had Dreadlords taking on Citizens Seraph. This is where Citizens Seraph would drop down to the losers bracket, as Dreadlords take a 3-0 victory and move on to the semi-finals of the winners bracket. Losers bracket round 2 then, and Citizens Seraph would take on No Commitments. Again, a very close game, with a 3-2 victory for Citizens Seraph as they move on to losers bracket round 3. Then we saw Olympians taking on Project Phoenix. This would be Olympians progressing through the losers bracket, as Project Phoenix can't keep with the Olympians and they get a 3-1 victory over Phoenix, and they will drop out of Open Division at this point. Then we had Vox Nihili taking on Ex Nihilio. This was a 3-0 victory for Vox Nihili, with them moving on. Ex Nihilio will be dropping out of Open Division here. And then another very close game between Sauna Esports and the Barcelona Manticores. It was a 3-2 victory for the Barcelona Manticores, the all-Spanish team moving on to the losers bracket round 3. So, without further ado, let's get to that losers bracket round 3 where we saw Citizens Seraph taking on Olympians. This, very close, but Olympians managed to get a very narrow 3-2 victory over Citizens Seraph, moving on to the losers bracket round 4. Then we saw the Vox Nihili taking on Barcelona Manticores. This would end Barcelona Manticore's run in the Overwatch Open Division 2020 Season 1 in Europe for now. Vox Nihili taking a 3-2 victory and moving on to the losers bracket round 4. So, semi-finals then in the winners bracket, and we saw Ex Oblivione taking on Sheer Cold. This was an interesting game, but Sheer Cold managed to take a 3-1 victory over Ex Oblivione, moving on to that winners bracket final. But who would they be facing? Would it be Notting Contenders or would it be Dreadlords? This was another narrow game. A lot of narrow games in the European region for Open Division in this early part of the year. But Notting Contenders will be getting a 3-2 victory over Dreadlords to set themselves up in a final of the winners bracket against Sheer Cold. So, losers bracket round 4 then, and we see Ex Oblivione take on Olympians. Again, another really close game with a 3-2 victory for Ex Oblivione in this one, and they would move on to the losers bracket semi-finals. Dreadlords would take on Vox Nihili. This again, really close game. It's amazing, this has been the closest region in Open Division so far, and I haven't seen NA and SA yet, so we don't know what's going to go on there. But this region has been a lot closer than the other regions. But this was a 3-2 win for Vox Nihili over Dreadlords. Dreadlords, though, they will make it into Contenders Trials with this result, so nothing to be ashamed of there. Vox Nihili moving on to that losers bracket semi-final where they would take on Ex Oblivione. You know, I was saying it was very close. Yeah, well, this wasn't. This was a 3-0 for Ex Oblivione. Ex Oblivione looking like a really good team. And it'll be interesting to see how they do in Contenders Trials when they get there, because basically if you're beyond this point, you're in Trials. So congratulations for that. So, winners bracket final then. Sheer Cold taking on Notting Contenders. This again was not close. Sheer Cold got a comprehensive 3-0 victory over Notting Contenders, with Notting Contenders dropping down to the losers bracket final, where they would face Ex Oblivione. Ex Oblivione really do give Notting Contenders a really close game here, but Notting Contenders do take a 3-2 victory over Ex Oblivione, cementing their place as the second best team in this competition, but they set themselves up for a grand final against Sheer Cold once more, but not much changed between the two matches, the winners bracket final and the grand final. This was just a best of 7, first to 4 format, and Sheer Cold basically took the extra map they needed. This was a 4-0 for Sheer Cold. Sheer Cold getting a comprehensive run pretty much through Open Division Europe for 2020 Season 1, dropping only a single map to Ex Oblivione in the semi-final of the winners bracket, and they definitely come out as the strongest team in this region's Open Division tournament for the start of this year. But we did have an extra game, and this was a 7th place tiebreaker between Citizens Seraph and Barcelona Manticores. This would be taken by Barcelona Manticores 3-1 and would decide the final place that would go through to Contenders Trials for Season 1. So it's time to confirm the people that will be going through, or teams that will be going through to the Overwatch Contenders Trials EU for 2020 Season 1. The top 4, which will get $450 of prize money, will be Sheer Cold, Notting Contenders, Ex Oblivione and Vox Nihili. They will be joined by Olympians, Dreadlords and Barcelona Manticores. In Contenders Trials for Season 1 of this year, they will be competing alongside the Eternal Academy, Angry Titans, Clockwork Vendetta, Shoes Money Crew, EU, and Nariki Esports when the Trials tournament commences in March. But that is it for the Open Division for Europe. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we are literally just about to get the results for North America and South America. Those games are literally going to take place a few hours after I'm recording this video, so they will be out in the coming days. We will take a look at those results. It'll be very interesting in North America, because in North America we get to see Phase 2 and Simplicity in that Open Division tournament. Because of the chunky North American region, some people had to be bumped down to the Open Division from that seeding tournament earlier in this year. But I am going to leave it here for this one. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.